me if I would take that role.
Right. And you told us that you were familiar, once you had attained that role of chief deputy clerk in the end of 2019, that you had spent a considerable amount of time reviewing statutes and rules pertaining to the type of work that you were required to do as a chief deputy clerk.
Correct, whether it was recording or the elections department or motor vehicle a lot, and of course, the clerk to the board statutes, yes.
Right, right.
And I attended a lot of training as well in Denver with Clerk Peters on those things.
Right, okay. And prior to your employ with the Clerk and Recorder's Office of Mesa County, how were you employed?
I was working for a local construction company as their office manager and coordinator.
Okay. So you'd had no prior government experience?
Correct.
Much like Clerk Peters?
Correct.
Right. But within the your experience in reviewing statutes, rules, and procedures, et cetera, you were able to learn certain aspects of the requirements or certain requirements of the Clerk and Recorder's Office relative to security, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And you also told us that there were security protocols in place, for instance, with regard to badge entry,
Correct.
right? And also you were told that the as part of the security protocols in the Clerk and Recorder's Office, that the equipment had to be air gapped.
That's correct. That's what I was told.
You used that terminology.
Correct.
Well, when you say that's what you were told, I mean, isn't it true that you learned that on your own, in your own research also?
I
You didn't
learned
just-
that as part of the looking at doing a remodeling in the tabulation room and working with IT as to what they had installed in there and the reason that the air gap was there. That's
Okay.
how I learned it.
Okay. I'm not sure we've had anybody actually define the term. To the best of your knowledge, what does it mean to you, air gap?
Simple terms was that there was to not be any internet access, such as if you were standing with a cell phone, being able to get access to that room or any of the equipment from a server or another computer or another cell phone, that type of thing. It was to protect the security of the equipment.
So I'm not sure I understand what you're talking about when you say if you're standing in the room with a cell phone. What do you mean by that? How does that apply to air gap?
My understanding was to prevent anybody from using internet access into that room.
I see.
And it was a pole that was part of that in the middle of that room, and we were looking at how we could change the flow of the process in that room. And the IT department told me it was put there as part of the air gap.
So you couldn't move a pole that was in the middle of the room?
Correct.
Okay. And I think you also told us with respect to the trusted build that was scheduled to take place in 2021 in the spring, that to your understanding, it was a software upgrade, right?
My basic understanding was it was a software upgrade.
Right. You weren't really required in order to perform your duties adequately for the Clerk and Recorder's Office to study all aspects of the trusted build, were you?
No, sir.
And in fact, you had gone on a previously planned vacation
Correct.
during the time of the trusted build, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And that was actually part of the problem with regard to Brandy Bance, who wanted to take a vacation at that time. Because
Correct.
Right.
She had asked for a 2-week vacation to travel the coast of California to visit family, at the exact same time, and Clerk Peters asked her to not take 2 weeks so she could be there as part of it. She asked her to be there to support it.
Right. Because you'd already received authorization to take a vacation yourself.
Correct. Plus, I was not intricately involved in the elections department in comparison to the director, Brandy Bance.
Right.
And it created a lot of issue over her wanting to take the 2 weeks and be gone that long, as well as me being out of the office.
Sure. And I want to discuss this issue that you raised regarding Clerk Peters and the sort of the mood in the office, if you will, or the thoughts that were surrounding this area, this time frame, just prior to the trusted build, if I can.
Objection, Your Honor, may we approach?
I need to hear the question first. I want to ask questions about that, and I haven't heard what the question is. So go ahead, and
Right.
you can renew your objection or not.
Thank you, Judge. I think you've stated in the past, and you may have stated it in your direct answers to Ms. Drake's questions in front of this jury, that you were well aware that Clerk Peters was very concerned about questions being asked by her constituents,
Yes,
right? So you were well aware that she was the type of person that was going to get things done and was going to answer her constituents' questions if they were brought to her attention. Correct?
That's very true.
Right. She was, would you call her a faithful public servant?
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor.
What's
Improper
the-
character evidence.
Sustained.
She certainly was very interested in responding to the concerns of the people in this county who elected her to that position.
Yes.
You would agree with that. And that leading up to this trusted build, you're aware that the process of the software upgrade was such that it was going to erase the data, correct?
I was not of knowledge that it was going to erase the data. I know that was the concern, that when they did the upgrade, it would override data. That was a concern. I did not know that it would not or would do it.
That it would what?
I didn't know that it would or would not do that. I didn't know what the trusted build would do. I know that was the concern.
Okay. It was a concern by Clerk Peters.
Correct.
Correct? And that she had learned that from whom?
I don't know.
Okay. Did you have any concept as to whether or not that was a valid concern? The erasure of election data?
I didn't have a concept that it was a concern or not a concern. I know it was her concern.
Okay. And you've told us that you reviewed statutes and rules and policies, et cetera, that pertain to the office, correct?
Correct.
And that in that review, did you come across any statutes, in other words, state enacted law, that required the clerk to preserve election data for 25 months following an election?
That is correct.
You're aware of that?
Yes.
And so, are you aware of what that requirement, strike that, were you aware of what a violation of that requirement would entail?
Objection, relevance.
Sustained.
Let me say it another way. So having the knowledge that there was a state law requiring Clerk Peters to preserve the election data for 25 months following an election, you recognize that she would have been very concerned about any process that would have deleted data.
Absolutely.
And you felt that that was a legitimate concern.
Absolutely.
Okay, right. you certainly didn't want your clerk, as the chief deputy, to be getting herself in some legal jeopardy over violating a state law.
Correct.
Right. And when there were concerns that were brought to her, were you aware of those concerns and from whom they came?
Only that Clerk Peters told me. And I heard from Sharona Bishop.
Okay. So Clerk Peters and Sharona Bishop both told you that there were concerns, did you understand what the character of those concerns were?
Just that there was a concern and the need to preserve the election records. We could not even pick up a piece of trash that someone dropped in a voting center and put it in the trash can. We always had a red bag, everything got put in there, even the piece of trash somebody dropped on the floor. And that went in to be preserved in those election records. And there was great care taken by Clerk Peters and the election department to make sure those records were preserved after the election.
Right. And you, I guess what I'm looking for is a little more specificity about the nature of those concerns. You've labeled them just concerns, but you actually were aware of more specifics, were you not?
Objection. Your Honor, I don't think this defendant has a foundation, personal knowledge to answer this question. She's already testified they weren't her concerns.
Her concerns aren't what's relevant, so if you could please rephrase the question, lay a foundation, please.
Sure. Isn't it true that you were aware that there were, in your words, concerns about shadow voters, I think was the term?
I was made aware of that, yes.
What did you, and you told that to all these prosecutors when you were
Yes.
interviewed, right? So what did you mean by that?
I was told that based on the records that it showed people who were deceased had voted. I attended an election training in Denver through the Secretary of State, I believe it was earlier that year, with Clerk Peters. And they went through a lot of statutes and to be aware and to what could take place. That's where most of my knowledge came from, was from the Secretary of State and what we did in online training. And I was made aware the importance of protecting the integrity of the election and the voter registration. In fact, I had been a part of having a conversation with, I'm not sure if it's Officer Cannon or Detective Cannon, when Sandra Brown had found a person that had voted that wasn't supposed to be voting, and Clerk Peters and I went and met with them about that concern, and it led to the arrest of somebody, long trail of convictions or a long trail of crimes, and the district attorney was able to follow through with that. So I had that knowledge and was aware of the sensitivity and the security around it and her responsibilities. And anytime I had a question and I went to her, she opened the Colorado Revised Statutes and we looked it up and we went over the statutes. So yes, I am aware of that. I was not privy to other than the county commissioners coming and sitting in her office and talking to her, two of them prior to being put into office, about their concerns.
Objection, Your Honor. That last part's non-responsive.
I'll allow it to stand. Go ahead, Mr.
I'll ask another question. Thank you.
Yeah, the objection's overruled.
You mentioned that you and Clerk Peters attended some training by the Colorado Secretary of State in Denver. Were there any other participants from Mesa County?
Kelly Bryant to represent the clerk to the board and to attend training. One of the ladies who no longer works in the election department also went to that training, and a lady from motor vehicle went to that training. Her first name escapes me right now, but we had about 5 of us, 6 of us, including Heather Benjamin at that time, I believe, also went.
Who's that?
She was the chief deputy at that time.
Okay. And this, I take it this was the Secretary of State's office that put on this training?
Yes,
What was it called?
I don't recall.
Okay. And at that training, you were made aware that there were reasons or examples of instances similar to the one that you described for us
Correct.
of shadow voters or voters that were or illegal ballots being
Correct.
submitted,
Correct.
right? And isn't it true that Clerk Peters was very concerned about that and what we all call election integrity?
Correct.
High concern of hers. Would you say that?
Yes.
Now, I'm going to ask you for some clarification about an answer that you gave to Ms. Drake earlier, and you had said when we were talking about you were talking to her about concerns that Clerk Peters had relative to the election equipment, and you said, and if I get this wrong, please let me know, but I have that. There was a concern of Clerk Peters that she needed to, quote, protect the information that was left on the equipment. Do you recall that testimony, your answer?
I do recall it. I know that she said she was going to run the backups because it was her responsibility per statute to preserve that information prior to the Secretary of State, which the Secretary of State did say back up your information, and then to run the same after the trusted build to discern if there was any missing information or lost information or overwritten information.
Right. So if you could sort of, in your own words, describe for us what you understood the intent of this process we've heard all about, which brings us here, is this copying of the election server. What was her intent in doing that? To the best of your understanding.
Lack of foundation beyond scope of direct.
Give me a moment, please. I believe it's within the scope of direct. There was questions about this and concerns about this witness testified as to concerns the defendant may have had in terms of intent. If you know what her intent was, then you can answer that, ma'am. If you don't, then you don't.
Would you repeat the question, please?
So if you could sort of, in your own words, describe for us what you understood the intent of this process that we've all heard about, which brings us here, is the copying of the election server. What was her, meaning Clerk Peters' intent in doing that?
From the moment that she asked me to have IT support her, it was to preserve the information on the server, whatever you want to call it, prior to and after the trusted build. That was her concern that she said to me. And
Okay.
whenever IT said they couldn't help, she sent me to go above the person I talked to at IT and asked for the head of the Mesa County IT department to be there. And again was told no. And I believe at that time is when she looked for someone else that could support her in preserving the information for the 25 required months.
Right.
Did I answer your question?
You did.
Thank you.
Thank you. And so her first move was to go to her county IT department for their support. right?
Correct.
And then having been told, no, we can't help you, she went above that first no and sought out an additional request up the chain
Correct.
and was told no.
Correct.
And do you know why they told her no?
Again, as I stated earlier, they said it was state equipment and they did nothing with the election equipment. They didn't touch it.
But you knew, because you were aware of the contracts, that it wasn't in fact state equipment, it was county-owned, was it not?
Correct. They had a agreement, I understand, from the contract that only they could maintenance it or upgrade it in order to make sure it was secure.
When you say they, do you mean Dominion Voting Systems, the vendor?
The Secretary of State. The Secretary of State and Dominion.
Secretary of State and Dominion,
That's who the contract was with.
right. And you told us a little bit about Mr. Gerald Wood. We've heard a lot about him. In fact, he came in here and testified a few days back. And you were aware that you were asked, I think you testified that you were asked to obtain a badge for Mr. Wood, right?
Correct.
And that you were, and that Mr. Wood was a software engineer. Did you know that?
I just was told that he knew computers and software. I don't know what his
And so-
education is.
Right. And so you were aware from the very start of your efforts to get him a badge and an email address that he was intended to be a consultant for the software or the computer equipment,
Correct.
correct? And did you ever learn why it was that that plan fell through to have Mr. Wood inspect the equipment?
I was not aware as to why. I don't know anything about that.
Okay, that's fine. You can only answer to things that you actually know, right?
Correct. I can tell you that his wife sat at the table next to me.
Objection.
Yeah,
Ms. Knisely, there's no question
Okay.
pending, so thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Administrator.
we have a real formal process here,
Okay.
and you can only answer a question. You can only speak when a question is posed to you, okay? I'll try to get through it. You know, I want to talk about this April 23rd, 2021 meeting that you referred to in your direct. Ms. Drake had asked you some questions about that, and I thought that you answered that Clerk Peters, Sharona Bishop, Dr. Frank, Sandra Brown, Stephanie Wenholtz, and Brandy Bance were there, along with Dr. Frank, this gentleman we've heard of by the name of Dr. Frank. Did I cover everybody that was in
I
that?
think there may have been also an attorney from Aspen.
Oh, did I miss that? Yeah. You don't know who that was?
I do not recall his
Do
name.
you know why there was an attorney from Aspen there?
I believe he was accompanying Dr. Frank.
He was accompanying Dr.
Yes.
Frank? Okay. Did he speak, or did you speak to
I
him?
do not recall.
Okay. And you mentioned that the purpose of that meeting was, I thought your words were an overview of the election data. Is that right?
The meeting I understood I was a part of was introduction of Dr. Frank and to talk about what he was going to present that evening, and then him needing a copy or a printout of voter registration, voter data.
And he was provided that by Sharona Bishop, was he not?
I believe he was provided it by either by either Brandy or Stephanie, but Sharona Bishop offered to pay for it, what
Got
the
it.
cost was.
Right.
I think it was
right,
like $20 or something.
Right. And Sharona Bishop then said, well, I'll pay for it, and she reached in and got a check and wrote a check out to the county.
I don't
right?
remember how it was paid for.
But you recognize that the purpose of that meeting was to hear Dr. Frank describe concerns or instances of, I think you testified, you called it phantom voting,
Correct.
right? And what did that mean to you, phantom voting?
Votes that were cast by somebody that truly did not cast them.
Right. And was there some indication in your mind that there had been some phantom voting going on? In addition to what you've described that you brought to the attention of the district attorney?
Nothing in addition.
No? Okay. What about the 2021 municipal election results?
Objection, relevance.
Sustained.
Okay. On that April 23rd date, were you present during the entire meeting?
I was not present during the entire meeting. I was called in after the meeting had already started, asked to come in and join them. I had been sitting across the desk from Clerk Peters. I stood up behind my chair and gave it to someone else. The room was very full. And I stayed, I think, probably for the majority of the meeting, and then I went on to do what I needed to do work-wise.
When you say you went out to do what you needed to do, what are you referring?
Work-wise, as far as the other responsibilities, the other divisions.
I see. Okay. But you feel as if you were there for the majority of the meeting?
The majority of the meeting, I think I probably was.
If I were to play...
Not for the beginning or the ending that I can remember, though.
Okay. Well, how is it that you, I mean, I thought this was a mandatory meeting among
The
your staff.
evening was a mandatory attendance, not the meeting in her clerk office.
Okay. The evening meeting
Yes, at the hotel.
at the hotel.
That was
Right.
mandatory.
Right, okay. If I were to play an audio tape for you, would you be able to determine whether or not you were present for that meeting?
Objection, Your Honor. The witness has already said she wasn't there for portions of the meeting.
Right.
So she won't know what happened in the portions where she wasn't present and wouldn't be able to authenticate the recording.
Mr. Administrator?
I'm trying to determine, let me phrase it a different way, Judge.
Okay, so I'll sustain the, or I'll just
I'll
consider the
withdraw.
question,
Right.
question withdrawn.
Right. Do you have an idea as you sit here today as to for what period of time you attended that meeting during the day in the office?
It was a meeting at the end of the day prior to going to the hotel. I was called in after the fact it had started and left probably before it was over. Being a Friday, end of day, I had other responsibilities.
You recall specifically that it was a Friday?
I do recall it was on a Friday.
makes you believe that you were not there for the whole thing? Other than you've already told us that you had to leave and do some other things.
I don't remember being there at the beginning, and I don't remember being there at the end of the meeting.
Got
That's
ya.
why I would say
Okay.
it was not.
Fair enough. That's a fair answer. Can I have one moment, Judge?
Sure, take your time.
You had an opportunity to determine if she'll be able to come back tomorrow. How do you suggest we find that out? Because I don't want to inconvenience her, but I also don't want to have her here for a whole hour to try to unpack it. I don't know.
Your Honor, may we approach for just a minute?
Okay.
Mrs. Nicely, we're going to set that issue of the audio aside for the moment, and I'm going to ask you some additional questions based upon your direct testimony.
Okay.
I think you had answered with respect to a question regarding the contract on the voting machines. You were aware of that contract, correct?
I was aware, yes.
Sure. And you'd had an opportunity throughout your experience in the clerk and recorder's office to review that document?
I would say I would say that I had seen it,
Sure.
knew what it was, but as far as knowing and understanding the entire contract, I do not have that
No,
information.
I'm not going to ask you to for specific legal
Okay.
interpretation or anything like that. I want to know in the broadest sense that this contract was actually between Dominion Voting Systems and the county,
Correct,
and the state, Secretary of State.
correct.
Okay. Just wanted that point of clarification. May I approach?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. This is nicely. I am handing you two documents that have been marked Defendant's Exhibit V, and they contain two photographs, V001 and V002. Do you see those?
Yes, I do.
Do you recognize those?
Yes.
And on the top of V001, there's some printed material. What's that about?
My email, my personal email.
Okay. And so you sent these two photos by email?
That's what those documents say, yes.
Okay. And did you take these photos?
Yes.
And what do these photos depict, if you can tell us?
When I was made aware of the fact that there was someone in the elections department without having, pardon me, without having an election employee in there with them, I went down and took photos because that was the requirement.
Okay. And who was that someone?
To my knowledge, it was the Secretary of State's office in Dominion, as well as IT. I believe Dave Underwood was also in there.
Okay. And you've described that as this first photograph, V001, right?
Correct. It was taken when there was no paper on the window.
So why did you take what's depicted in V002?
Because the paper was put up where I could no longer observe what was taking place in the tabulation room. And there was no person that was approved to be in the election department tabulation room without them.
Okay, great. I'll leave those there. So you took both of these photographs yourself,
I did?
and they depict the outdoor view of the tabulation room, correct?
Correct.
And the second photo, V002, shows the same doors that are in 001, only they have paper on them, right?
Correct. And I've noted that there is a door with the DA tape.
And who put that paper up, if you know?
I do not know who personally put it up.
Okay.
Somebody within that room.
So what you're saying then is I guess this may sound a little crazy, but were those photos taken in the same time frame?
Correct. I had knocked and asked for access after the paper had been put up and was denied.
Okay, so let me get this straight. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you observed the tabulation room, you observed unauthorized persons from the Secretary of State and Dominion in the tabulation room through the windows,
Objection,
correct?
objection, lack of personal knowledge. She wouldn't know whether they were authorized or not.
Okay,
Mr. Administrator,
pardon
you
me?
said okay as if you were going to respond, so.
Yeah, I was going to rephrase the question.
Oh, okay, then I'll, the question's withdrawn.
You were obviously employed as the chief deputy clerk at the time you took those photos.
Yes, and I was directed by Clerk Peters to go down and observe what was going on in her absence.
Is this during the time that she was in Virginia with an ailing uncle?
Oh, no, that had happened the year before.
Okay. But she was absent? Clerk
Yes, this
Peters
was following
absent?
the symposium, and she left South Dakota and did not return back to Grand Junction at that time.
I see. Okay, okay. So now I'm understanding the time frame. So you advised her by phone that this was going on?
I was on the phone with her, yes, her
Okay.
and Sharona Bishop.
Why don't you tell us what was said? Give us a sense of this phone call.
As I stated earlier, I was told to go down as the clerk in her absence and observe, find out what was going on. There was a subpoena to search her office as well as the election department, and to stay on the phone with her, tell her what was going on. Take photos, which I did, and with my personal phone, and emailed them to her.
I see. And so did someone that was inside of that tabulation room observe you taking the photos?
Yes, the video and the photos.
Okay. And so what you're telling this jury then is that shortly after you took V001, you took V002, which was the paper placed on the windows.
Correct. I believe I'd walked back down the hall to take care of one of the other departments, and when I returned, the paper was up.
Okay. I want to talk to you a little bit about the surveillance cameras. You had said that you studied the statutes and the rules, and you were aware, were you not, that there was no requirement either in state law or in rule that required the clerk and recorder to have these surveillance cameras on at all times?
That is
Correct.
correct, at that time.
Right. And there was a time, and I'm not quite sure exactly what year, but I think it was in 19, when there were 4 elections ongoing in 1 year, was there not?
Objection, relevance.
What's the relevance?
The relevance is with respect to the surveillance cameras being on during that time frame.
The objection is sustained.
Then, following along with your direct testimony, you were responding to questions from Ms. Drake about Gerald Wood and the badge. You had met with Mr. Wood, correct? You met Mr. Wood, did you not?
Briefly, yes.
Right. And Clerk Peters had told you, in terms of having you assist in getting his badge access, that he was not an actual employee, didn't she?
She told me that they were able to bring in consultants anytime that they needed, and that that's what he was.
Great, okay. You never saw him after he gave up his badge, did you?
No, I did not.
Right.
Not in our offices, I should say. I did not see him
Right.
in the
that's-
clerk's office, correct.
That's what I meant, sure. Judge, I think this is probably a fair point to stop in my examination. I'm almost there, but I really need to reassess my notes.
Okay, all right, yeah, we're just about at 5 o'clock anyway. So we'll go ahead and take our break for the evening. Tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen, it's Wednesday again, which means I have my docket in the morning. This time around, I have some matters set at 9:30, which I didn't have last week. All that being said, I'm still gonna have you come back and be ready to go at 10 a.m. I'm just letting you know that there's a chance that I might be delayed tomorrow a little bit. My hope is I won't be, but I don't know. It really just depends. I've got a few dozen or a couple dozen cases I need to get through before we come in here, one of which is set for about 15 or 20 minutes or so. So it'll just be what it is. I want you to keep in mind the admonishment I've given you. It's been a lot of information. There's still a lot more to come, so it's important you keep that open mind. Don't discuss this case amongst yourselves or with anyone else. Don't do any research about this case or this kind of case. I know I'm a broken record, but there's a reason behind why I'm telling you this. Don't get on social media. If you have even the slightest concern, you may come across something. Don't just avoid it. I know how difficult that may be. Don't discuss the case with anyone, even those who are not involved in this case. Of course, don't go to any of the locations that we've talked about and the like. Most importantly, have a good evening. I know it's been a long day. It's been a long couple of days. Tomorrow we'll have a little bit of a later start, so you get to start a little bit later, can sleep in if you want, or get other things done, whatever it may be. But 10 a.m. is when I would like to have the jurors back, and we'll see you all then. All rise for the jury, please. Thank you. Go ahead and take a seat, everyone. Ms. Nisley, I think you're done for the day.
Okay.
I'm sure you want to stick around, but you are welcome to go.
Thank you.
Before she goes, would you consider an admonishment that she's still under oath? Because it appears that there's gonna be an opportunity for her to meet with the government to review this audio tape.
The sequestration order does not apply to attorneys, so she'll get sworn in again tomorrow. I don't see her testifying between now and later, so you're free to go, Ms. Nisley.
Your Honor, we've not yet been provided the copy of the audio or transcript of what the defense has requested us to have this witness review. We will certainly do everything we can to make that accommodation, but we don't yet have it.
Okay. All right. Is there anything else we need to take up? I do have one quick matter, but I'll get to it once we're done with any other things between the parties. Ms. Drake?
Not from the people, yeah.
Mr. Administrator, anyone from the defense, anything we need to take up?
I've been asked to be an assistant. Do we need to get those exhibits and bring them to your clerk? Or?
Yes. Well, not to my clerk because they haven't been offered into admission, so they're just yours.
I was gonna seek to have them admitted at this stage.
I don't think that's appropriate to do outside the presence of the jury unless the,
Okay.
Ms. Drake, what's your
I'll just
position?
hold them till tomorrow.
Yeah, let's wait till tomorrow because Ms. Drake may want to voir dire, she may object, she may stipulate, I don't know.
Your Honor,
So,
if it's okay with the court, our preference would be to have the clerk hold them because they have been referenced and so
Oh,
they'll be
okay.
part of the record. And
Sure.
we can pick up their admissibility tomorrow.
That's not my standard practice, but if that's what everyone wants, then I'm happy to accommodate.
Thank you.
Your Honor, for the record, we're giving them Defense Exhibit GG-18, which is a copy,
Okay,
and then we will email the transcript.
great. Obviously not to me, I don't need it.
Right.
So, yeah. Anything else? No?
I don't believe so.
There was an objection as to hearsay as it related to Ms. Bishop and some of the statements she may have made that were in furtherance, some of the statements she may have made to Ms. Nisley. I had previously ruled that the prosecution at this stage of the proceeding had established that a conspiracy existed. We did that at the bench, outside the presence of the jury. At that time, I didn't make any findings as it related to Ms. Bishop, an unindicted co-conspirator. I made findings relative to the folks who were at issue at the time. We had that discussion. I would just incorporate by reference all of my findings I made at that time and further find that Ms. Bishop is included amongst those individuals with whom the prosecution has established that a conspiracy existed between the defendant as well. So that's why I overruled the objection. I didn't need to hear any further argument about it. I had already gone through all the findings, heard argument. I can't imagine the argument would have been different for Ms. Bishop from either side. But that's the record that I'm making now. It's not an oversight of the court at the time. I understood what I was doing. I knew what I was doing and just wanted to wait until now so we could not waste time.
And Judge, I'm sorry, there was one other matter. The attorney for Dominion had a request if you could potentially rule on that this evening, if you're able to.
You know, I'm sorry, Ms. Regan-Smith. What happened while you weren't up here, Mr. Case had specifically asked to reserve that issue until he could be present. There was no objection from the prosecution, and I didn't even think about you being here, and you're welcome to appear by WebEx. Well,
Your Honor, I can be here tomorrow as well, if we can take it up maybe in the morning, that would be great.
yeah, I know, you probably want to get going.
Well, I mean, it's also mostly just that Mr. Frontera needs to know, he doesn't think he's under a valid subpoena, he needs to know. if that's
Right.
not gonna go along.
I will say at this point that I think the subpoena is valid. I'll make that finding. You've already submitted arguments on it. I know the defense is going to have their opinion. It is a valid subpoena. I've read it. It is missing one piece of information as it relates to Rule 17, but I don't find that that is of such import that it would otherwise negate the effectiveness of that subpoena. So as it relates to the validness of it, I will find that it is a validly issued subpoena that has been properly served. The rest of the issues, I need to hear from the defense about, and then I'll hear from you, and then I'll make a decision.
Okay, I appreciate it, and just one more thing on the record is that,
You need to get up to the microphone. And what's your name?
Apologies.
I'm sorry?
Leah Regan-Smith on behalf of Michael Frontera.
Okay, and your just registration number for the record, please.
I
Oh.
really wish I knew off the top of my head, I don't.
I bet you attorney administer does.
49808.
I did not mean to put you on the spot. I'm sorry.
57148.
Okay.
We weren't present on the 31st, which was the return date.
I thought it was the
or
30th.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, the 30th, which was the return date of the subpoena. Has it been continued by this court? Is there an order that
I
doing
think it
so?
was it? I thought it was continued. I'm pretty
It was,
sure.
Your Honor.
My recollection was, does the DA have a difference of opinion as to whether I continued it? I'm pretty sure I did.
I'm sorry, Judge, I remember you regarding the subpoena, Mr. Frontera?
Yes.
Yes, you indicated that was true, and until such time that you released him, he was required to be here.
Yeah. I think I'm relatively confident I did that, but that feels like eons ago.
We-
Okay.
And obviously he wasn't here.
Okay, yeah,
Um,
sorry, we had requested from Mr. Case the transcript earlier, and he had told us that you didn't have it.
Oh, and maybe he received it this morning. We can forward it to you if you provide us with your email.
Yeah, I'm entered as counsel of record for Mr. Frontera on,
We have
on that, so, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Send it along that way.
So what else?
That, I just wanted to clarify that on the, that validity in your ruling, that it is still that it's a valid
Yeah.
subpoena and you are ruling that's still in
That's
effect.
my recollection from last Tuesday, is that there was a request to continue it, there was a request to note that he wasn't here. The options at that stage when someone's not here are generally to issue a warrant for their arrest for failure to comply with the subpoena. Continuing it is a trickier
Yeah.
prospect, because how do they know it's been continued if they're not here? But obviously, usually, I think most folks would prefer just to not have the warrant, and
Yes.
he's
Well,
represented by
I would also,
counsel.
for the record, we were not served by the court your amended order. We had only received the order quashing the
Right.
subpoena.
I
So
saw, I don't know why that
I-
didn't
yeah,
happen.
I have no idea.
I click send, and whatever happens is whatever happens. So
Yes.
I don't know where that confusion came in, but I've issued that's my order for now. We'll take up the merits of the subpoena and whether he should be compelled to testify tomorrow. I'll try to do it. You know we're behind schedule, so
Yeah,
I'm
no,
gonna,
I absolutely appreciate that. I'll be here when you need me,
Yeah.
and I appreciate you.
okay,
taking
thank
time.
you.
Thank you.
So
Your
we'll
Honor.
have everyone here. I'd say 9:45, because I do believe, if I can take up this issue, I'd like to take it up and just get it done with. I know my hope was to do that at some point today, but we couldn't because Mr. Case left. And perhaps I get done early tomorrow, which it won't happen now since I'm saying this, and we can do it at 9:45. Anything else?
I'd like to just note my objection on that ruling, backing up to the hearsay.
Sure, no, yeah, no, your objection's preserved, yeah.
Thank you.
Your Honor, I just wanted to clarify for the record, the court's finding was by preponderance, the jury still gets to deliberate on the conspiracy.
Oh, of course, right.
I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah,
I
the
do-
the
do
burden
have
of
that.
proof, the burden is, I believe it's a preponderance.
Yes, sir.
It may be a lower standard, but I'm going to go with preponderance, and that's the burden that was in the court's mind, so. Okay, thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day. Please clear up as you have, because we'll have lots of folks here tomorrow.
Thanks, everyone.